to another Just 5 Mins. And what have we got today? Well, we've got Podman, not Pacman. Yes, there's a little joke there somewhere. This is Podman, and it's very similar to Docker, but not at the same time. So what is Podman? Well, it's a container engine like Docker that helps build and develop containers, managing the containers, the images that underlie those containers. And the idea is that it's, I suppose, at a top level view, both Docker and Podman are based on the Open Container Initiative, which I hadn't heard of. And why would you when you're not in that world fully? But the OCI standards. So they've got a set of standards for container technologies, ensuring compatibility and interoperability, if I can say that word. So that's a good thing. You can sort of interop, Podman containers with Docker or the runtime. But this means, many of the commands used in Docker, certainly for pulling, pushing and building images, and also are also applicable to Podman, which is a good thing. So really then what is the difference? Is it just another flavor of Docker? Well, no, not quite. I believe this is actually from the Red Hat side of things. So it's an open standard from the Red Hat sort of people, okay, which I think is linked to sort of IBM now, which not a bad thing at all. That's where that's come from. And one of the big differences, which you sort of think, well, okay, shouldn't Docker do this anyway, is the daemon-less approach. And let's face it, you don't want any more demons, do you, in your life? At all, in fact. But of course, we're referring to the daemon-less approach in the underlying code, so running as essentially like a background service. Okay. So there's a couple of advantages there, because Docker, not that it's a major problem. I'm not kicking Docker at all, but obviously, if the underlying Docker daemon goes down on a machine now these days, let's face it, there's lots of redundancy, clusters, Kubernetes, goodness knows what. But ultimately, if the Docker engine goes down, any of those containers that were running are going to be affected. And have had that happen just locally, even, where I've had 2 or 3 containers running, one for like a database backend, then some code backend and a front end or something like that. So I could have like all of those running. Now, if the Docker daemon sort of dies for whatever reason, all of those go down. Okay, so the idea is with Podman that gets around it, because it sort of forks itself. So every container is running independently. So if one container goes down, well, you've got a problem, but you haven't got a big problem, or you haven't got multiple problems. And also Podman basically doesn't run like a background daemon. Okay. It essentially runs directly from a client, like a client user, and it uses something called fork-exec model. Okay, I don't really know too much about that because I'm not a super duper Linux guy, but that's where the architecture makes Podman more efficient, lightweight, and secure. Because obviously, if you're running as a client user, as it would, you can make those client users different for different containers. You've got a little bit more control where it's not sharing that sort of root access like in Docker. Okay, so that's a few of the selling points of Podman. So you can understand, root versus rootless sort of logins. Yep, really good. Like I say, the OCI compatibility, brilliant. So the other thing it's got as well, just very quickly, is it's Podman, so it does have pods where you can essentially cluster those containers together, a little bit like Kubernetes. So much so that you can actually use it, because it's an easier way, from what I've read anyway, to actually learn about sort of clusters and things like that, to move on to Kubernetes if you want to use that. So it's got that element of Kubernetes built in, as it were. So yeah, very interesting um, thing, and it's not anything really new. It's been around. I guess Docker's got the limelight because of possibly being out first. I don't know the history of these two, but obviously Docker is a bit like, yeah, the first to market sort of thing that everybody's picked up on. But Podman certainly going to be having a look at that, because of some of those lightweight, a bit more secure. You can run the containers independently. So I think I'm definitely going to have a look at that in the next week or two. So that's what I've got this time. Slightly over again, but there we go. Don't shoot me. And take care until next time.